Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms.
You know, I've been doing this work for 45 years. And over that time, I invented my own technique. I began to find out new things that came in that nobody else had ever discovered. So big and so important, so we called it QHHT, because it's way beyond past life regression. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years. Well, as part of this technique, the very first thing that you do is take the client into a past life. Past life is just the very, very beginning. Then we go to this great power that I work with. To please take advantage of the training that is now available online. You can find it through my website, DoloresCannon.com.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now listening to the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with PMH Atwater, who knows what it's like to die and the experience that so changed her life that she has devoted years to researching the phenomena of the near-death experience. From her own encounter with life after death and from interviews with hundreds of others, she presents her remarkable and reassuring vision into a world beyond the one we know. PMH Atwater is one of the foremost researchers of the near-death phenomena. PMH, welcome to the show.
I'm really glad to be here. This is such a treat.
Oh, it's great.
Imagine I'm in England.
Isn't it incredible the way that technology has, just brought us together more?
Yeah, it's a gloomy day in Charlottesville, Virginia, but right now I'm in England.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, I think as well, it's given a platform as well for people like yourselves to really get to the right audience as well.
Well, that's my privilege and my pleasure.
So PMH, just briefly, tell us a bit about yourself and your experience in 1977 when you died 3 times.
Oh, well, 3 times in 3 months. I look back at it and I call it the heavenly sledgehammer effect. I just got hit again and again and again. If that doesn't tell you how stubborn I was beforehand, I don't know what will. That was in Idaho. I'm an Idahoan. I was living in Boise, Idaho at the time. My experiences were caused by a miscarriage, then extreme hemorrhaging, then phlebitis, major blood clots, on and on and on and on and on. So the first experience was January 2, then January 4, then March 29. So just, boom, 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 one right after another. Later that fall, I had 3 major relapses. So 1977 wasn't my year. When we talk about near-death experiences, most people seem to forget that these experiences come from violence or trauma. Most of them do. So you've got a body to rebuild afterward. So you're not just dealing with, a light show with a storyline that really shocks you out of your, comfort zone, but you're also talking about this body of yours that needs a great deal of attention. And in my case, I was one of those people that had to relearn how to crawl, how to stand, how to walk, how to climb stairs, how to run, how to tell the difference between left and right, how to see properly, hear properly, and had to rebuild all my belief systems. So I got the big whammy. And then later that year, sort of had to do it all again. So it wasn't until the following year that I was reasonably human again. I could say I'm a human being, I'm functional. A lot of people talk about angels when they talk in terms of their near-death experience and how great it was and how wonderful the light was. But I've got to be honest, I had to say to you that day that I could walk an entire city block in downtown Boise, Idaho, without falling and without screaming pain, to me, that was heaven. It was just, whoa. My first experience is primarily an out-of-body experience. A lot of other things went with that. My second one was long and complex, involved certainly out of body. First one out of body, second one out of body, but going to other realms, other places, other activities, and coming back to my body. And that was very difficult for me because, it's sort of like I wasn't quite all back. I really think a lot of near-death experiencers really haven't landed yet when they come back, because you just have this glow. You're a little confused. You don't know what to do about all this, and you don't know where to put it. So you're really not focused in the earth plane. You're sort of there and here and kind of nowhere. And that's where I was. And then with the third one, that was even longer and even more complex. And in that one, I truly feel that I was at that point of at that point of the center point. I really feel that I was at the center point of creation and consciousness. And while there, I heard a voice speak. I was a meditator before, and was acquainted with other realities before my experience. Back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, I had been a very dedicated researcher and an investigator of altered states of consciousness, mystical states, altered states, psychic phenomena, and this kind of thing. So my experiences were not new in that sense, because I was familiar with being in other realms that that were not, that I didn't know about. I was also very comfortable in being without an ego. I didn't need an ego. I was comfortable in other realms, but that third one blew all of that away. Really, really. That background did not help me that much at all. My third experience was above and beyond anything I'd ever heard or seen or knew about, felt. I can't really describe it except to say where I was at this center point. A voice spoke, And, how do you describe a voice like that? It is so big. We don't have words we don't have words.
No.
It's like it filled creation itself. It's like creation itself was speaking through that voice. And I called it the voice like none other. And that voice said to me, and I quote, "Test revelation. You are to do the research. One book for each death." Book number 1 was not named. Book 2 was named. By the way, that's future memory. Book 3 was also named. I'm now working on that book. I was told what was to be in each book, basically at least, but not how to do the work, how long it would take me, any of that kind of stuff. So, you're coming back with these heavy duty pronouncements, and it's like, what do you do with this stuff? And in the following year, I met Elizabeth Kubler-Ross at O'Hare Airport, right out of Chicago. I had gone there to visit an aunt and uncle, and her plane was late to Europe for about an hour or more, and so the two of us sat down on a little bench and talked like a couple of schoolgirls for that hour. And I told her about my 3 near-death experiences. She validated me. That's really important, to be validated.
Yeah.
And she validated me, but she never used the word experiencer. She said I was a near-death survivor. And she was the one who told me about the pattern, gave me the name. I had never heard of Raymond Moody, knew nothing about his book. That was totally unknown to me. So I began my research shortly after being with Elizabeth because, yes, that was wonderful, but in me it created more questions than it gave answers. So that's why I began my work, not knowing that anybody else on the planet was doing the same thing. And it wasn't until, years later, that Kenneth Ring, he was the man who validated scientifically the near-death phenomenon, the work of Raymond Moody. We all owe Kenneth Ring kudos for that, and thank you for that. He's the one who did that. And Ken Ring was in a bookstore in downtown Hartford, Connecticut, and came across this little bitty book I had written called "I Died 3 Times in 1977." Great title. Original title. I died 3 times in 1977. And and he thought that was kind of a weird title too. That's why he bought the book and read it and traced me down by telephone. Just kept after me and after me and after me until finally found me. My husband and I were living then in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and he came calling, and he stayed overnight. We literally almost talked the night away. And he said I was ahead of anybody else. He said nobody knew what I did. He said it's time that you come up to Storrs, Connecticut and find out about your peer group. And I said, peer group? You mean somebody else is doing this? Well, yeah, somebody else was doing it, a whole lot of somebodies. The International Association of Near-Death Studies. And so I went up there to Storrs, which is the home of University of Connecticut. He was a professor there. And the first office of IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, was in Storrs, Connecticut. So I drove up to Storrs and found out about my peer group and came aboard and joined IANS, I think maybe 2 months after they started, after they birthed. I was right there in June. And then, then began to know that there were other people doing this, and I began to write about what I had found. And it was different than others had found. And over the years since, bear in mind, my work has never been, I've never followed the Moody model, which is called the classical model, because I stayed with what I found. And certainly what I found in many ways supports the Moody model, but not completely. I found clearly 4 different patterns of the near-death experience. The universal pattern is indeed universal, but within that are 4 sub patterns, if you want to put it that way, or 4 different types that are very distinctive. I went deeper into children than anybody else, including Melvin Morse. He got a lot of his ideas from me. And I did more work with the after effects than anybody else had or still has.
Yeah.
So, and I've been there. I'm sorry to be laughing, but I was there as the little kid in the crowd saying, wait a minute here, there's more, or it's different, or we need to look at this.
Yeah.
And so I've been sort of the challenger, helping but challenging both at the same time, saying, look, guys, wake up here. Yes, it's wonderful that you're doing using the scientific protocol, but when you're dealing with consciousness, and especially a phenomenon as deep and as broad of scope as the near-death experience, what you're using, especially questionnaires, are all biased. You're using words in front of before the individual. You cannot do that. You can never use a word, ever, in advance of an individual. You can only use that word if they use it. That gives you permission. Remember, I'm a cop's kid. I was raised in a police station. And Dad was very fussy about things like that. And he also said, the body says more than the mouth does. So I was very much an observer and looking how they used their body, how they used their eyes. Didn't make any difference if somebody walked by. Did gender make any kind of difference? Age make any kind of difference? Culture make any kind of difference? Belief system? And whenever I could, I would get into the homes, have sessions with the significant others as well. So I was very fussy in doing that and very strict in doing that. Because let's say I would be meeting with people in Florida, well, is that the same as people in Minnesota or people in Alabama or people in New York City? Is it the same way with Black people as white people, as brown and yellow and all the colors in between? What about religion? What about belief systems? Does this make any difference?
Yeah.
So I was very... I was very insistent on looking at the near-death experience from 360 degrees. And so I found a pattern of after effects that is both physiological and psychological. And just now, we're starting to get some of the science on the physiological parts and changes in brain structure. So they're now starting to catch up with me a little bit, but I'm still this kind of scruffy Idahoan.
well, this is why.
Wait a minute here, guys.
Well, this is why your work is so fantastic. I mean, you're a pioneer in what you do, and the amount of material that you've written, the institutions that you've worked with and set up and everything, it's just incredible what you've done. So you're very respected, you are. And with your near-death experience as well, I mean, what do you think, in a very brief way of explaining it, I suppose, what do you think the near-death experience teaches us about living, dying, and our sort of true purpose, in a sense?
Well, if you're going to be honest, a near-death experience teaches you more about life than it does death. And what it teaches us, what it shows us, what it unveils for us is that the human being is far more capable, far more intelligent, far more able than any of us think. All of us, have psychic and intuitive abilities. All of us are creative and innovative. All of us have power and abilities above and beyond what we're ever taught, what we're ever shown, what we're ever able to manifest. It sort of takes the lid off of what it is to be a human being. And what our mind is capable of doing. It's so exciting when you look at the material and you look at the after effects and you look at the stories and you look at the people and what they're doing afterward. And it just blows you away. At least it does me. Let's take, for instance, children. In my research base of 277 child experiencers, 48% when they were old enough to take standard IQ tests were scoring between 150 to 160 with no genetic markers to account for it. That's just like, wow. And I go into that very, very deeply and into the new children and near-death experiences, and I give you lots of percentages. But the jump that happens to these kids, it's like they're jump-started. It's like they're kicked into higher states of consciousness. One of the things they're sort of kicked into or shoved into or pushed into is being abstract. We've got little bitty kids here, 2 and 3 years old, that are dealing with abstractions and concepts like a person in their 20s or 30s. Let me give you an example. There's this one little boy. Oh, gee. Where did he live? I'm going to say Georgia. I'm going to say the northern part of Georgia, a little bit out of Atlanta.
Right.
And this kid is a first grader, dies in a drowning. Lots of kids have die in drownings, and was brought back. And this is halfway through the school year. So when he was able to go back to school, halfway through the school year, and bear in mind that at that age, at least here in the United States, in school, the books they were reading then were Dick and Jane, See, Spot, Run, the very simple kinds of Dick and Jane kinds of books. This little kid comes back to school and he's reading Greek mythology and understands it, and goes up to his teacher and said, "Why was the book Robinson Crusoe ever written?" It's a first grader. That's typical. That's typical of what happens to the brain. The brain is jump-started or kick-started. What happens with the brain is just, for me, very important and very exciting. it just opens up all kinds of doors to who we are, not just what we are, but who we are.
That's right.
And it opens up the spiritual. It opens up the spiritual worlds. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But have you noticed? Have you noticed though that most people who are interested in looking at the research of near-death experience, because it's a very fashionable thing right now, and I think that's great in a lot of sense. But all they want to know is about heaven and hell. They don't want to look at some of the principles and teachings that can come from the near-death experience.
Okay, let's talk about heaven and hell. My research base now numbers nearly 4,000 adults and children. So that's a lot of people. That does not cover all the people I've spoken with, been around, cases I've read, so forth and so on. So with all these thousands of cases, I can look at that and see that at least in my experience and what I've seen, when we die, we go to wherever it is we resonate. It's as if on the other side are layers and layers and layers, dimensions, sort of like a layer cake. There's all these layers, and they're separated by frequency of vibration. So who you are, who you really are, not who you think you are, not who you say you are, but who you are deep, deep down inside, your frequency of vibration. That's what is in charge, if you will, or the drawing, and it will draw you or pull you to whatever level you need to be. So on the other side, there are levels that are dense and dark and slow moving, and a lot of people call that hell. There are levels that are speedy, uplifting, faster, more light filled, and most people call that heaven. So we have this dark and light, this arrangement on the other side. You can call it heaven, you can call it hell. It's really separated by vibrations and speed of vibration. What I've noticed in this construct, whatever you want to call it, this construct on the other side is that it has no top and it has no bottom. There's no way you're going to rot forever in hell, and there's no way you're going to sit on some kind of cloud playing a harp forever. Forget it. There's no top, there's no bottom. But there's movement in this construct. Movement in the sense that choice is still involved. And that if you want to improve, you can. Or if you want to goof off, you can. There's a lot of choice here. There's a lot of flex here. And it's not necessarily what our religions teach us, what our mom and dad taught us, or what we want to believe. But rather it's based on, as near as I can tell, a greater dynamic or a higher law. Now, if you really want to take a look at the near-death experience through the eyes of the people who experience it, please, please, please tell your audience, buy the book, Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience. It is the only book on the market, the absolutely only one worldwide, that enables the collective to speak as a collective about the collective experience. All I did was sum the voice of the many. There's a little bit of research in it, not much. There's a few cases in it, not that many. It is the voice of the experiencers themselves. So you get the straight stuff, you get the real stuff without being interfered with anybody's opinion or any researcher or anybody's ideas. You get the straight stuff from start to finish. It's a small book, won't take you long to read it, but it's a powerful book. It's powerful in that, again, it's the people speaking as themselves. So you've got this straight, direct communication. And since then, I've put together this show, if you want. First time I've ever done anything like that. I now have a show. It's called Glimpses of Beyond.
Wonderful.
And it is 40 drawings from people in 6 countries about their near-death experience. And it's in a PowerPoint, and I put it on, it's straight through. There's no clicker, just maybe about a minute and a half or so on each drawing. It just goes right straight through. And at the bottom of each drawing is the name of the individual, the age when it happened, and the basic cause. And then I'm over here, not on a podium, but a music stand. I insist that it be a music stand. And then I share from the book. So you've got 2 very different things happening at the same time in the same space. It's on the principle of entanglement in science, and it all comes together at the end. So I do offer that. Anybody in the world wants it, let me know. Of course, you gotta pay me to get there, but
yeah.
But I'm just so I'm just so committed to this book. Certainly to all my other books. I mean, I've written 11 books on my findings. So you've got near-death experiences, the rest of the story. That's the summation of my work. You've got the big book of near-death experiences that gives you the global picture with many of the different scientists and people involved. And of course, you've got future memory. You've got, lots of books that I've written. But this one, Dying to Know You, this one touches me the most deeply because it is the people's voice. And I just feel very humbled and privileged to be able to have put this together and have it available to the public.
Right. And do you think we have to incarnate onto planet Earth, or do you think there's other planets we could go to, or have come from? And do we choose our families, do you think?
Oh, you're going out into the mystical. You're not focusing on near death here or near death research. You're now choosing to explore deviations of the research and hopefully getting a little deeper into how the people process things now and the greater and broader viewpoints that they now have and belief system that they now incorporate. So I want to be very clear that we're not talking about near-death research here, but rather auxiliaries to that or extensions of that in questions about the human condition, God, spirituality, and that kind of thing. So now that we've been clear on that, what we're doing, not everybody comes back. In fact, most do not come back with any idea of reincarnation. That comes later. Some people adopt that later on. I did have a few cases that did involve reincarnation, where they found themselves in a past life. But there is this sense, reincarnation or not, there is this sense that we as a soul, and I want to be very strong in that, in talking about the soul, because almost everybody does. We're talking about the soul. The soul has a mind of its own. It's our greater self, our higher self.
Yes.
And the soul very much needs and wants to grow, to become more, to become co-creators with the creator. It's almost as if that's the job of the soul, is to become a co-creator with the creator. And where else than planet Earth, or something like planet Earth, to come to find out more about how to do that, to become better, it's like the curriculum is over there, but you form your muscles over here. This is where you learn the curriculum. You get the curriculum over there on the other side, but over here, speaking now specifically of planet Earth, over here in human bodies, this is how we work out that curriculum. We come to understand it. This is where we form our muscles. If we're talking about other planets, other systems, you didn't hear that much about that in the early days of near-death research with the people. You really didn't. It's only been, I would say, in about the last 15, 20 years that you're starting to hear more and more near-death experiencers coming back and talking about other worlds that they saw or visited, mostly saw, or came to realize other beings in other worlds, in other galaxies. So that's fairly new in the research, fairly new in the data. How do I personally feel about it? I have no problems with that at all, none whatsoever. Absolutely none for me as a person.
Yeah.
But to make broad statements, I have to be a little bit careful about that, or I should say I choose to be a little bit careful about that, because I don't want to mislead anybody.
No, absolutely. And I just wanted to truck that question in just to see where you stood with that. And that's very interesting. And you're dead right. Let's keep it within the near-death experience right now, because that's what we're focusing on. But I just wanted to get your opinion on that as well. But would you say that the near-death experience, in a sense, proves the near-death experience to make it valid?
I don't think we have any difficulty. In fact, I know we have no difficulty today in saying that the near-death experience is a real, valid experience. It's not any kind of dream. It's not any kind of vision. Nobody made it up. There is enough solid science behind it now to say that medicine, especially medicine, all of science, but especially medicine, needs to wake up and address this. Nurses, doctors, all kinds of healthcare providers must, as part of their protocol, learn how to deal with children and adults who might have had a near-death experience. And in my book, the big book of near-death experiences, there is a chapter there for the medical people that give the protocol. So you doctors and nurses and orderlies out there, get the big book of near-death experiences, flip over to that chapter, and you'll get the protocol. It's right there. It's already done for you. Diane Corcoran, the president of IANS right now, a former Army nurse, is working very much with medical people, and especially with veterans, because this is a big issue with veterans, extremely big, because Veterans Administration, the various veterans hospitals and forth, and I'm sure in any country and worldwide, do not allow their soldiers coming email to talk about anything like this. If they do, they're automatically shoved into the psych ward. And we've got to get over that, because veterans especially come back with incredibly challenging stories. We need to listen to them. We need to help them deal with this. because many times near-death experiences, although incredible experiences, cause a great deal of depression afterward because the person can't talk about it. They might wind up in a psych ward. They might have difficulty with a family, friends, boss. So sometimes, a little help is invited or necessary, and certainly getting a hold of IANDS. It's just www.iands.org, and get a hold of Diane Corcoran, the president, or anybody there. Certainly, you can also get a hold of my website, www.pmhatwater.com. And I do have this free monthly newsletter, so sign up on my website, get the newsletter. There is an archive, and I deal a lot with near-death issues, but I cover the waterfront. I all kinds of issues. I'm a very curious person, but I want to sort of jump in here and say, look in the archives for that issue on electrical sensitivity. This is a big one for near-death experiencers. Many of them in my research base, between 71 to 77%, were displaying electrical sensitivity afterward.
Wow.
So that can be a big one. Do you have time for a brief little story?
Of course.
It's 3 days ago. The fluorescent light over my kitchen sink burned out. And so we replaced it with another fluorescent tube. Wouldn't work. So that means I had to call the electrician. The electrician comes over and sort of tears up the entire light fixture that the tube went into, and brought the whole thing down and showed me. He says, "How long has that fluorescent light been working for you?" And I said, "About a decade." It was a good light. And he had the funniest look on his face. He was so puzzled. And he looked at me again and he said, "It really was working for you?" And I said, "Yes, we didn't have any problems with it until, it just sort of blew." And he said, "Lady," and he showed me. He says, "Lady, none of the wires in here are connected. There is no way that light could have ever worked." And I just laughed at the guy and I said, "Well, strange things like that happen in this house."
Well, that kind of leads on to my next question as well, which, what isn't being said about near-death experiences as well?
Oh, we could be here for hours and hours and hours. The physiological changes, people don't talk about those. They just talk about, you lose your fear of death, you become kinder, more loving, more generous, often change jobs, become more psychic, more intuitive, more creative. Certainly, more dream-oriented, bigger dreams, better dreams, more colorful dreams, visions. All those things, yes, do indeed occur, but also, let's look at the physical part. Definitive changes in brain structure and function, changes in the nervous system, changes in the digestive system, changes in skin sensitivity, more sensitive to light and sound. Certainly electrical sensitivity, that's another big one. We could just, I could just go on and on and on, but more sensitive to taste, touch, texture, smell. But that electrical sensitivity, now that we're in the digital age, is most absolutely huge. You have to be careful of routers. You have to be careful of Wi-Fi. Most of us cannot wear watches. Obviously, I'm not wearing a watch. I either burn it up or it burns me up. Um, you learn how to deal with that. I give a lot of um, um, steps on how you can be at a computer, like me right now. I'm at a computer. My router's over there. Always have your router sitting on a cork board, by the way, always cork. Around your monitor, your keyboard, you want amber, you want hunks of amber, not the expensive stuff. Forget about that. It can be unpolished, hunks everywhere, because amber transmutes and absorbs and transmutes all of the negative energy, the blue lights that come off your computer, the radiation that comes off your computer. Um, uh, when I first started using a computer, within 3 weeks, the joints in my fingers and all over were just aching and swollen. I started using amber, gone. Don't have that problem at all anymore. Amber makes a huge difference. It just absorbs all that stuff. And there's lots of things you can do in the way of a light. That is to say, a window, light coming in the window, different kinds of plants around, especially grass plants, spider plants that absorb radiation. There's lots of definitive things that you can do that make a difference. And we do need to do that. And the idea of the spiritual, oh, hey, we haven't even touched it on that. Prayer and meditation, mindfulness, so important afterward. Absolutely so important. 90 to 95% of the near-death experiencers that I've been around and worked with, so we're talking thousands of people, 90 to 95% come back not believing in God, but knowing God. In the book, I say God, Allah, deity, in honor of the 3 major ways that we name this incredible source, this incredible power, this incredible intelligence, but it's there, and it gets to that point. For me, it's like I breathe God. It's not something I believe in. I breathe it. That's God.
Well, what is not God?
There's nothing that's not God. And this idea of unconditional love, everybody's talking about love, love, love afterward. And certainly, you're filled with that, or at least are introduced to that incredible feeling. But, that can mess you up afterward, mess you up in the sense that, every woman you see is your mother, your daughter, your aunt, and your sister. Every man you see is your husband, your son, your father, your uncle. It's not that you can't tell the difference between people. Of course you can. But that love, you just feel it for everybody. And sometimes near-death experiencers can be said to be flirting, or other people get jealous. And all you're doing is just passing on that joy and that love that you feel. And that can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Until you finally get to the point where you realize that unconditional love, God's love, cosmic love, is love without an object. You love everybody. We're just not prepared or schooled or experienced in that kind of love. Really, until you get to the point where you really know what that is. It is, love is the self-givingness of spirit. Love is the self-givingness of spirit. Yeah. That's a good definition.
That's beautiful. That is. That's really beautiful. And with yourself, I know you've been in the presence of God and the energy of God. But then, as an NDE experiencer, when you look at sort of religion versus your understanding of God and God not being condemning, how does some of these religions fit into your picture, or do they not at all?
Oh, I'm comfortable in any church, and anywhere I travel, I want to go to the churches, and I absolutely go to the churches, any that are not locked. And believe it or not, most of the churches, at least in the United States, that are not locked are Catholic churches. So often I wind up in a Catholic church because it's not locked.
Yeah.
But I'll go anywhere, even into a mosque. I've been invited into a mosque a couple of times, went. Um, Islam really is the religion of peace. It really is. Uh, but it's the way it's practiced by Muslims today that is anything but peaceful. It has been perverted by the clerical staff, clerical people, to the point now where much of what we hear about Islam today, I think, is an embarrassment to Allah. That's not Islam. That's just murderous thugs. So, and the idea of, denying women their rights and that they can dress as they please, that's not in the Quran. None of that's in the Quran. This idea about Sharia laws, that's not in the Quran. Go read the Quran, folks. That's an invention of the of the Muslim Brotherhood. No,
Yeah.
sorry. Islam is a religion of peace, and I feel very comfortable in a mosque that honors real Islam.
Right. Well, just a bit of a question that's on my mind right now with your work as well. Do you think we should move from sort of New Age to sort of New Thought?
Yes, I do. I really encourage people, if they will, to move from New Age to New Thought. The New Thought movement is an old one. It was originated by Plato. It's the idea of the perennial philosophy, this idea of oneness, one people, one mind, one family. And if you get into true oneness, that's what the New Thought movement is based on. Now, that really came into fruition heavily in the 1800s, especially around 1840. And all of your transcendentalists are New Thought people. People like Thoreau and Emerson, that's all New Thought. And then coming forward in time to people like Ernest Holmes, and his Science of Mind, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore and the Unity movement. That's all New Thought. And my husband Terry and I are very comfortable in churches, but we choose to go to a Unity church. We would really prefer. Used to be the Church of Religious Science. Now it's called Centers for Spiritual Living. They changed their name. Same thing. We would much prefer that, but in our area, what we have is Unity, so we go there. It's often called a metaphysical church. And those are really formed around the realness and incredibleness of you, who you are, and what you can become. The New Thought movement originally was based on the right of self-healing, that you could heal yourself or others, and direct contact with God. You did not have to go through an emissary. Direct contact with God and the right to heal. that was the beginnings of the New Thought movement. But very much this idea of oneness, which we get out of all of these incredible transformations of consciousness. I don't care what kind you had, whether it's a near-death experience, baptism of the Holy Spirit, mountaintop experience, Kundalini breakthrough, shamanic vision quest. I don't care what kind you had. These transformations of consciousness are very intense, life-changing shifts, not only just in your consciousness, but in your life and the physical body as well. And to take that, what you learn, what you gain from that, and go to New Thought churches of any kind. That's where you're going to get the real support, the real upliftment, the real camaraderie, and the real kinds of teachings that will help. Certainly, coming back with a lot of psychic ability, I do recommend that you go to a good teacher of how to use and how to develop psychic ability.
Yes.
I think that's good, but take the rest, not necessarily with a grain of thought, follow it through, learn what you can about it, but come back to that which most enhances and frees you. And you're going to be coming back to some kind of new thought endeavor.
Well, we've almost got to the end of the interview here, and my final question to you is, what do you think is the most important message in your work?
Most near-death experiencers, when they come back, they say, always there is life. 4 words. I don't care where in the world they are, always there is life. If you look at that, really look at those 4 words, that means there's no before life, there's no now life, there's no afterlife. What it means literally is you always were, you're living now, you will always live. It literally means eternity is our home.
Absolutely, absolutely. And PMH, where can people find out more information about yourself as well?
Well, certainly my website, www.pmhatwater.com. And any of my books, you bet. And subscribe to my free monthly newsletter, sure. Invite me to your area as a speaker. I'm going to be at Findhorn, by the way, this year, September, late in the year. So investigate what's happening at Findhorn. They're going to have a big conference on consciousness, and I'm one of the invited speakers.
Well, PMH, I love you very much, and thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Bye.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk. And do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.